happened? I ruined it.
No,
Chris, I'm out of control.
you are out of control.
Oh my God, I'm out of control. Right, because the ginger beer is still in a can, even though it's not alcohol.
Well,
Right.
it's in a bottle, and it's got a twist off. It makes a little noise, you know. It
It
kind of has
makes
that
a
satisfying,
little fizz.
that kind of.
Little- a little. I ruined it. I ruined it. Oh, I
You didn't
apologize,
ruin
Chris.
anything. Fantastic. Everything's perfect.
Well, thank
Everything's
you
great.
so much, Chris. Hmm?
And this ginger beer is very good. It's not as good as Midnight Sister's ginger beer, but
Yes, Midnight had a wonderful ginger beer that he brought with him in August. That was good. It was spicy. It was fantastic.
it's
Hey,
great.
Mom and Dad are out there in the audience. Hello, hello.
Yeah, and mom says, "Are those new glasses?" She's
Mom,
trying to.
they are new glasses, Mom. And you know what? With these new glasses, I got several different fun frames. In addition to Santa, I've got, we've got Rudolph along with that. Okay. Okay. We've got Rudolph. We also have, just a good old Christmas tree. Prescription. Given that they have no lenses, I'd say that they're not. And we've also got some snowmen right over here, which would
Wow,
be
you are
appropriate
crazy.
for today. With all of the snow that we've gotten. Happy first snow. Well, it's not really the first snow, but happy holiday season snow. I
That's
also
right.
grew bulbs out of my head. That's correct, Mommy. We're, this is too funny. This is too funny. Chris,
What?
in the last 2 wonderful years that our live stream has been around at the holiday season, we had a holiday open mic, but we decided, we're doing that in person open mic. So we're just going for, feature readings till the end of the year. But this is actually our last our last reading of 2022. Welcome, folks. We are
It
so,
is.
so, so proud and excited to finish off the year with 2 FUMFA writer all-stars, Rebecca Dimyan and Derek Ivan Webster. It's going to be an awesome evening. But, we had to bring a little holiday fun and silliness to our live stream because we know we're going to bring it in person next Friday, right, Chris? Or this coming Friday.
This coming Friday, it's gonna be silliness like has never been seen before, at least in South Norwalk.
That is 1,000,000% correct. And you don't want to miss it, folks. Listen, Phil Lemos is coming down from Massachusetts.
Great.
We're going to have some holiday fun. We have so many advanced signups. We have incredible feature performers as well. It's going to be so much fun. Also, we have our own discount code at Eco Evolution. So, I mean, and we're going to be there. So you gotta come out. You gotta come down.
If you have some shopping to do for the holidays, there's at least 1,000,000 stocking stuffers in that store.
At least 1,000,000
At least a million. Anything from dog, like special organic dog soap.
Yep.
To very cool socks. And
Fruit Loops scented candles.
Loop scented candles.
Very, very cool mixed media artwork of famous people.
Lots of art. Lots of art. If you're looking for big gifts, and then there's like little tiny gifts, everything in between, little, just tons and tons of stuff. And while you're at it, you can have some coffee and some pastries.
And get to hear and see some pretty incredible performances, because since it's an open mic, we have awesome writers there, but we also go beyond that. We have musicians, we have comedians, we have a young man who does parlor tricks. It's pretty awesome. Yeah.
It's just a cornucopia of of song.
Cornucopia, indeed, Chris. Thank you so much, Pete Nelson. He is loving the
I do
tiara.
need one.
Chris, you do need one.
I need something on my head, but and I'll take whatever it is. Pete Nelson was at our last uh,
Oh,
in-person open mic, and he just slayed, as they say.
totally slayed. Oh, just fantastic songs. Oh, Pete Nelson, if you can come down this Friday, it'd be amazing to see you and hear you play again.
You can catch a ride with Phil.
Yeah, that's right. Phil's coming down. Hello to all of our friends coming in the chat. Hello to Heidi. Heidi's in the house. Hello to Brenda. Hello, of course, to Pete Nelson, and hello to Mary Catherine. This is wonderful. Wonderful to see you all this evening.
It's 8:02, and
We
we're late for the official welcome.
I'm late for everything today. You know, it must be the tiara. The tiara is leading me astray.
It's the snow. It's the snow.
It's the snow. It's the snow. It's definitely the snow. We need to give you an official welcome, everyone, to FUMFA 115. Our last reading of the year and our last stream of the year. We are so excited to welcome this evening Rebecca Dimyan and Derek Ivan Webster, two of our FUMFA friends and colleagues, and we're so excited for them to have a feature reading spot tonight. They're going to give fantastic readings, and then of course stick around for our Q&A at 9. It's going to be wonderful. And Chris, we've already been talking a little bit about what's coming up, but remind the people what's coming up.
Yeah, we'll remind them that if you're around anywhere within I don't know, 500 miles, you can come out Friday. It's the 16th. That's this upcoming Friday for our live in-person open mic night at Eco Evolution in South Norwalk. And we have some fabulous featured performers, including Laurel Peterson, right? A lot of you folks know Laurel, as well as Jesse McEntee, who's the poet laureate of Westport.
So cool.
And we have Nettie Smith.
Nettie Smith.
And those are the featured guests, but then we have all kinds of folks going to show up. And like we were saying, Phil Lemos coming down from Massachusetts. And we've got Autumn Harvest going to do some comedy. We've got who else signed up?
One of our guests, Nicole Caruso Garcia, is coming down. Signed up.
Frank, the whole gang. The whole gang. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be great.
It's going to be crazy. It's going to be awesome. And we're going to be encouraging everyone to wear their festive holiday attire, whether that's silly fun stuff like this, or an ugly sweater, or anything that makes you feel fun and festive. We're gonna make this quite an event. It's gonna be wonderful.
Absolutely. And then we're off for a couple weeks. This is our last live stream of 2022. Hard to believe. Going into 2023, and we'll be back on the 8th of January with our New Year open mic. And if you're interested in participating in that open mic, please drop us a line. You know where to find us.
Yes, for all of our friends who are, maybe outside of commuting distance or who can't make it to our in-person open mic, we want you on the show. So we're kicking off the new year with an online open mic. So we're going to have our sign up for that real soon. But if you want to send us a message or an email while you're waiting for that, we'll get you on that list. Anyhow, it is time for us to welcome our first reader of the evening. We are so pleased to welcome Derek Ivan Webster. Hey!
Hello. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're so excited to have you, Derek. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. I was able to do one of the open mic kind of things a while ago, and thanks for having me back. It's a little intimidating for 20, 25 minutes, but let's see if I can hold it together.
Oh my gosh, Derek, you're going to be fantastic. We're so excited that we get to, just hear more of your work. that's one of the things we love so much about the feature reading. So you're going to be fantastic. Let me introduce Derek with his bio. Derek Ivan Webster's first novel, Wisdom of Salmon, involves a powerful and personal journey, drawing as it does from his 30 plus years as a sockeye salmon fisherman in rural Alaska. Raised in a remote fishing village and educated at Yale, Derek spends a lot of time wrestling contrasts. A recent graduate of the Fairfield University MFA program, Derek is also the director for creative careers at Yale University, where he helps young creatives to find their professional pathway. His wife and 4 kids rarely see him before he crawls out of his morning writing cave. I love that. Thankfully, he's almost human by then. More info at ivanhope.com/Derek Ivan Webster. You can just give that a little click on Facebook and wherever you see his bio posted. Give him a little Google. We're so excited to hear from you this evening, Derek. Take it away.
Thank you. All right, so yeah, the project that I'll be reading from is my first novel, Wisdom of Salmon. I should say just to start that it's a work of fiction, totally. But it does draw a lot from just my thoughts, feelings, and memories of being a commercial fisherman for sockeye salmon in Naknek, Alaska, Bristol Bay for the last 37 years, actually, until recently. Recently retired from the trade. So, and in some ways, this book was a little bit of a love letter to 3 decades plus of commitment, a pretty unique situation. So, one of the things that drew me to this project, not just anchoring it in a place, a unique world and setting that I know, but also just the mixture of Alaskan folk tales and mythology, native mythologies, and borrowing from different mythologies of people who have immigrated up there over the years. It's just a very rich, sort of magical sort of a setting. And so we're going to start out this reading with actually the excerpt is from the prologue, very short prologue at the front. All right. The Raven and the Tundra Spirit, excerpt from a Kogyung folktale as retold by Sonny Wastley. The raven flew low enough to scan the beach for the carcass, but not so low as to draw attention from the lazy gulls or whizzing pipers. He knew the body was out there somewhere, though the gray morning light offered little help. The raw stench of the thing pulled him, for the Tundra Spirit had it. Of course it did. No life was lost within a mile of the shoreline without that beast being involved. Ahead, the wooden, tide-bleached bones of a crumbling dock reached up out of the mud and mire. It was an old sight, at least in human terms, but not so old for a raven that it soared across so many human lifetimes. He found them in the shadow of the broken pier, not so much hiding as waiting to be revealed. The body was as small and crumpled as a doll before the creature's hulking shoulders and maw. It was well known that the beast had no taste for living blood, though it had patience enough to outlast a cooling heart. That the body had not been consumed suggested it must still cling to life. The monster might also be waiting for the girl that would follow. Its hunger was massive and not at all limited to its stomach. The raven wheeled a circle around the beast and its treasure. His call was loud but non-committal, a broad warning to the world that none should reach past their territories. A monstrous huff blew muck over the rugged heap of the man. The beast was laughing at him, a mere bird come to tell the king of the tundra what he could or could not take. The raven broke away and continued down the shoreline, even as a blinding mist slid over the bay. He would not need his eyes to return to this place of death. And return he would, but not until the girl had completed her journey. Together they would confront the beast and teach it the limits of its strength. So that's the prologue. So the story at base is about a father and a daughter escaping up to the wilds of remote site Alaska for fishing and also just running away from some things. Though they're both escaping and they're kind of wedged together in a very intense situation, there's barriers, emotional barriers between them. And so a decent amount of the story is about overcoming those barriers. And it's told from the perspective, a split perspective, alternating between chapters with the father and chapters with the daughter. The father chapters, 45-year-old, 30-year plus fisherman were easier for me to write. The 14-year-old, thick-headed, but very, very adventurous daughter. Was not as easy to write, but the challenge was also a reward. And so here's an excerpt from one of the daughter's chapters. The daughter, something wrong. Text to In the Weave 7. Thanks for the books. Epic flights. Text to In the Weave 77. You there, Madre? There's a stuffed moose in this airport. Bigger than my next plane. Not delivered. Text to In the Weave 77. Seriously, I think there's something wrong with my phone. Not delivered. So, Mom asked me to write this letter. I shook my head, almost laughing, same as when she shoved that pack of calling cards into my bag. Not gonna happen, I said. I could tell it hurt her feelings, but not in the bad way, in that way where I make fun of her, but it's more like I'm trying to include her in the joke. I'll text, I shrugged. I noticed her hesitation then, I really did, but I wouldn't put it together until later. She'd pushed to get me on this trip. There was the trouble I was in, sure. That had set the ball rolling, but the negotiation hadn't gotten real until we started talking about crew share and covering the cost of my monthly phone plan for a year. It took a lot out of her, enough that she thought better of telling me there would be no cell service to speak of once I made it out to the bush. I guess she got what she wanted after all. Now my fingers are cramping as I scribble this in the notebook that she slid in the side flap of my bag. Well played, Mom. I really didn't think you had it in you. Not that I'll let her read any of this anyway. This journal is purely for the study of my own misery, and maybe to warn anyone else silly enough to wander their way up to Naknek, Alaska. The morning was a blur. I remember a tiny plane that had done a disturbing amount of rattling in the sky before landing on a different planet. Dad picked me up from the playground-sized stretch of asphalt that passed for a runway, and we barely even spoke on the way down to the beach. There was one moment that he almost cracked a smile. Flintstones, I shouted when he tossed my bag into the bed of that completely junkable white truck. It's still running? Barely. That's when Dad's lips twitched up at the corner. The three of us used to bounce up and down the beach access road, shocks shot. You could watch the ground whiz by through the rusted out holes in the floorboard. Mom would shake her head and say we needed an upgrade. Dad would talk about the convenience of being able to step through the floor and walk the truck forward if it ran out of gas. I'd never seen the cartoon they were riffing on, but I laughed along with them. Yabba dabba doo. Then the cannery. I mentioned another planet, right? Everything's made out of these wooden beams that look like they've been salvaged from Noah's Ark. Some of the buildings are half built or maybe half demolished. And then you'll find some shiny new aluminum machine standing right next to a rust-locked tractor that probably hasn't moved since Alaska became a state. Dad left me to find some supplies. Not sure how surprising it should have been that I went for a stroll. I did find a boy. I'm starting to think that's one of my superpowers. He was cute too, not Patty cute, but there was something about him. A local, almost amber skin, jet black hair, wide, sharp cheekbones. We just started to chat, and he'd even told me his name when Dad showed up and things went sideways. Okay, I suppose I should have expected some of the probation after all that went down, but since the only thing Dad had ever said about the debacle had been screamed over the phone, it's not like I knew where everything still stood. So Dad huffed and he puffed and he blew the boy away. He won't hear it from me, but it actually might have been for the best. I still have enough to work through with all that went down. The only good thing about this trip is the space it gives me to think. There's no shortage of that. Back at the locker, we finished with what felt like 5 miles of nets. We were just racking the gear and adding numbers, but getting through all those shackles was no joke. It's like on a third Sunday, laundry day, when you stay up late and help fold the 100th load. The eyes want to close and the mind doesn't think it's going to happen. It's the heart that's just dumb enough to keep going. By the end, I was more than a little loopy from the jet lag and the hours of standing, and my joints ached like I just ran a marathon. When Dad closed the net locker and said we were done for now, my chest surprised me by tightening up with a real sense of accomplishment. There for a minute or two, this place felt like it wasn't going to be one big basket of suck. Then we headed back to the cabin. The beach truck rumbled its way up a narrow gravel road that wound back behind the cannery and up a nearby rise. When we reached the top, one side fell away and we were driving on the edge of a cliff, a sheer drop of 30 feet or so down to the rocky beach below. What's the matter? Dad asked. You used to play on those cliffs. I don't remember them being so steep, I said, doing my best not to focus on the open space that hung just outside of Dad's door. Erosion, slow and steady. Wind and rain are always grinding away at the bank. Someday they'll drag the whole thing out. Then how would you even get to the cabin? You mean if I'm still around? I nodded, and he shrugged. We'd make a new road. Or if the tide pulled down the cabin, we'd make a new cabin. The truck finally pulled away from the edge of the cliff as the road opened onto a long, flat stretch of gravel. The old cannery runway, this I remembered. We parked the truck near a thick wall of alder bushes. Out my window, the line of weedy gravel stopped at the alders and shot out perpendicular to the cliff, another 100 yards or so into the expanse of tundra. Once a landing strip for the processing plant, the same bank recession that had raised the cliffs had shortened the runway, to the point that the only thing that could land there now were seagulls. Dad got out of the truck and grabbed hold of my bags in the back. I jumped out to follow, but the moment I came around the bed of the truck, the wind gusted. I actually had to take a step back and steady myself. The air was steeped with the tang of salt and swampy turf. Yep, this was it, the smell of my summer childhood. I took one step closer to the bank, then another. As I neared the edge, the high vantage brought a fuller picture of the beach into view. The tide was still far enough out to expose a half-mile of mud that reached all the way back from the distant water line to touch the narrow band of rocky sand at the base of the cliffs. There were pockets of shallow water strung together between silty creeks, still trying to drain their way out to the departed bay. A few bright rubber buoys atop the mudflat provided the only thought of man. Above me, a steady line of gulls used the natural updraft from the cliff to help soar atop this world. I jumped a little when Dad appeared beside me. Might want to try your phone. He nodded his head back toward the deserted runway. Service doesn't really make it this far out of town, but old runway's probably your best bet. What? In the mix of it all, I'd just gone longer than I could ever remember without checking in on my device. It was in my hand in an instant, and I thumbed my way through settings to turn the cellular back on. I'd shut it down to preserve battery the moment I realized how spotty the connection was out here. Now I watched it cycle on. I stared at the spot where those four little bars should appear to tell me the world as I know it was still okay. Searching, searching, searching. Even one bar, come on, the slightest proof that this reality still had a pulse. Searching, searching. Nothing. Dad had the audacity to shrug. You might need to go to the very end. We can try it later. The phone went away much slower. One more disappointment to add to a long list. On the way down from the airport, Dad had reminded me there was a payphone at the cannery, and there were always the year's worth of calling cards Mom had stuffed in my bag. Still, until that moment, I hadn't quite believed that the vibrant headquarters at the core of my social existence could be so simply reduced to a brick in my pocket. Carefully preserved months of Snapchat streaks would end. Lengthy chains of Instagram DMs would wither, unanswered, unseen. Even the omnipresent ping of texts, random bits of contact that quietly added up to a reminder that I was actually part of other people's lives, would fall silent. I wouldn't swear on it, but I was pretty sure I heard the phone weeping from my back pocket. All right, so I mentioned it's alternating, so that's an excerpt from the daughter's chapters. The father's chapters, they open with a fictionalized biology excerpt from a biology textbook that's tracking the life cycle of the sockeye salmon. And then in the story, this part comes a little bit later, so that the father and daughter eke their way through this salmon fishing season, and things actually seem to be going okay until they're not. And things go really wrong really fast. And so the situation the father finds himself in, it's a pretty dire situation in terms of mortality and danger. And he's also in the midst of this abyss, sort of staring at and having to deal with some memories that are bubbling up from his past. So, the father, instinct for survival. All sockeye salmon start their life in the cold, clean, fresh water of their stream or lake-based spawning grounds. Fertilized by the last desperate act of the dying males, near the end of the summer, they are buried by their mothers beneath a protective layer of gravel and debris. Those that survive the predatory fall have the dark months of a frozen winter waiting to incubate them. Born of these harsh conditions, it's no wonder the sockeye have such a pronounced instinct for survival. From a sockeye story, The Biology and Life Cycle of Oncorhynchus nerca by Melvin Munson. There's a flow that surrounds him like a tunnel. The liquid holds him, pushes him, embraces him. It is neither hot nor cold. Such distinctions have lost meaning. It has a smell, though, simple but powerful. The first, or is it the last? Flicker of his mind understands this to be the scent of purpose, the trace of vegetation or growth or life. But there are thoughts more fitting to the surface. Down here, the scent is more complicated, harder to track. He feels he is safe where he is within this flow, tumbling after that scent. He trusts it will provide for him. There is danger, a part of him realizes, if he stays here too long. This thought is tied to another need, a pain just beginning inside him, in that hollow cavity that used to be his chest. But what he needs is so far away, and the flow is right here, and it seems so much safer, so much easier here. Something moves past him, or maybe he moves past it. There is an up and a down, but it is not entirely clear which is which. The object is so much larger than he is, more solid. It has a weight, a reality he reaches for but cannot grasp. So much he cannot grasp. The loss is a distraction, just enough to catch his attention, help him to feel the weight around his legs, pulling him downward. That's right. There is down again in the direction the gravity of his legs has found. There is something surrounding them, encasing them in a liquid stone. Someone screams in his head. It sounds like him, but he can't be sure. It's not him, but someone like him, like who he's become. Get those boots off. The command comes again, this time powerful, and right above his floundering attempts to stay afloat in the icy water. He falls into the clarity of this moment, grateful to realize where he is. 10 years old, the voice is his father's. It's late in the season, fall fishing, and his father is putting him through the yearly ordeal he calls remedial training. The term is vaguely military, and he assumes, without ever asking, his father has borrowed it from the time he spent in the Air Force, stationed on a remote site in Alaska. You hit the water, the boots come off. Otherwise, they fill up and drag you down. The father speaks in his high-volume, matter-of-fact voice. The father is not angry, at least no more than usual. But the volume warns that you had better listen the first time. Everything else, all that thrashing and sputtering, is just going to get you drowned. He thrashes and sputters in the water and tries to cough out a, "Yes, sir." He tries to tread water, but his boots have filled and his legs are frozen anchors beneath him. If he stops slapping the water, even for a second, long enough to pop the button snaps that hold the hip boots to the belt loops of his jeans, he will sink. His father watches from the edge of the dock, not 10 feet away. He sips at a steaming tin mug between observations, each one stated with the simplicity of fact. You're afraid to go under. You think you won't be able to make it back to the surface. That's a mistake that's going to kill you. The boy might be crying, but the splash of the water and his quiet resolve will not admit it. Yes, sir, I can do it. His words come in bursts, hacked out along with the air he tries to capture between mouthfuls of brackish water. You can't count on me to help you. What if I wasn't here? Only you can save you. Yes, sir, I can do it. Moments pass, then minutes. The cold is a phenomenon. It's crept through his useless fingers and toes, hands and feet, arms and legs. It begins to seep into the fire at his core. His motion, still grasping, begins to slow. Less air comes in, more water spits out. His eyes begin to bob beneath the surface. You can do this. You have to do this. I can. An explosion of water as the boy takes a mouthful into his lungs and spews it back out. His eyes are as wide as a stranded sculpin, and his arms slash into wide, uneven circles. Water sprays in every direction, patterning the wood of the dock at the father's feet. You'll die if you can't. The boy can't respond. The weight has pulled him under the surface of the water. He takes the violent thrashing down with him. Soon only unsettled water and a string of air bubbles remain on the surface. The father takes another sip from his mug. He watches the diminishing air break the surface for a few minutes and then shakes his head. He goes down to one knee and sets the mug on the gray plank beside him. The rope is old but strong, and his pulls are slow but long. His motion is constant, deliberate, as the boy is lifted out of the water in a wet, coughing mess. He sets the dripping mass on his feet and yells when his legs begin to crumble. Don't you dare sit down. The father unties the bowline from around the boy's chest and takes a step back, as if to get a better look at him. You died, Eric. Do you know why? The boy is heaving, failing to control the convulsing coughs. He jerks his head from one side to the other. You give me a clear answer when I ask you a question. For fear? The words chatter out. No, Eric. The fear could have saved you if you'd listened to it, used it. You died because you gave up. You didn't care enough to fight. You were weak. The boy still trembles. He hears his bones clatter against each other. He ducks his head up and down. Use your words, Eric. Yes, sir. Good. Now get those boots off. Get back to the shack. There's fire going. Beans are on the hot. Beans are on the stove. The boy thrust the ice picks of his thumbs and forefingers down to snap off the rubber ties of his boots. He falls over as he tries to step out of the hip waders, and gallons of salt water rush out, covering the dock. Up! The father yells, and the boy springs back up from his hands and knees. He starts to stumble down the long pier. This is Graveyard Dock. He sees the ramshackle old cabins speckling the hillside behind. One of them has a dim window, the promise of warmth. Run! He runs, a stumbling stride, until the limbs regain their first hint of feel. His inside churns even as the rush of cold sears his skin. He knows he might puke, and he runs harder to get farther away from his father in case he has to empty his stomach. Run! The voice comes from behind him, more distant now. He runs so hard the dock disappears beneath him. The liquid tunnel forms around him once more. He's back in the flow. He's fighting. His hands, their ice pick thumbs and forefingers, thrust toward the straps he can't see at his waist. The boots are pulling him downward, but now he knows. Rigid fingers stab at the weight of his belt loops. Something unsnaps. There's a release. He kicks the boots off and away. He must leave them behind. He must go up now, not down. He will fight. He will care enough to survive. All right, so the last excerpt is going to be, it's another from the father's chapters, but it's after, so things go from bad to worse to almost surreal, a little bit of magical realism speckled in there maybe, and tender spirits and whatnot. And this is a chapter that's kind of on the right at the peak, or right around that portion. And it's more an observation of the father as staring into the abyss and trying to find, after quite an ordeal, what the important things are. The father, one last endurance. It has survived an epic sea journey, and while meticulously searching its way home, escaped the impressive system of seine, drift, and set nets put in its way by man. Now a sleekly muscled saltwater creature, the fish catches the slightest whiff, the distant memory of its hatching. Having refused the 100 false leads that came before, it finally commits to a river system, to a final freshwater ordeal, and quietly seals its fate. The poisoning is a slow process, and its effects stretch over the weeks it will take the fish to leap and launch its way up the narrowing stream waters that lead back to the spawning ground. As the fish burns through the last of its energy reserves, fighting rapids, rocks, bare claws, and teeth, its body begins to transform again. Its face turns a sickly green. The nose elongates to a beak and thins to reveal its own fangs. Its dorsum hunches into a prominent hump, and the body turns the bright red of its namesake. It is devolving now, the flesh infected, dying, and beginning to rot from the inside. After a blinding series of challenges faced and miraculously overcome, a relative peace of clear and placid water is attained. All that remains is the singular, simple purpose of releasing the reproductive cloud that has dominated every fathom of its existence. The violent mixing of egg and sperm, the bearing of these promises into graveled beds, is less an accomplishment than one last endurance. With nothing left, its body empty and its skull as soft as a sponge, the monstrous cadaver is too well adapted for survival to die easily. Instead, it floats, purposeless, untethered, alone. Thus will it fulfill one final essential purpose, a lingering grand irony to complete the cycle of the salmon. This is what he feels. Pressure under his arms as something pulls and tugs at his body, moving him if only an inch at a time. The cold smack of earthy wetness against his face and neck, sometimes splattered, sometimes the gravity of the world grabbing him from below. A throbbing in his hands and feet as if a fire is caught between his skin and bone, consuming him from within. The remembered pressure of teeth pushed into the scalp at the back of his head, and a hulking darkness sucking at his face. The weight of shadow in his mind as he tries and fails and tries again to recall where he is and what has happened. This is what he smells. The stain of blood and offal smeared in tracks across his face and laced into his hair. The corruption of mud, its ancient seal broken, reeking with a barrel-burned blackness. The metal tang of an overcast sky pressing down from above with a cool wind in the memory of a receding storm. The salt cut of insatiable water churned into a mist that covers everything else, like the blowback from the falls at the end of the navigable earth. This is what he hears. The wincing grunt that pulls at him, moving him one pained heave at a time, the press of air across the flatness shared by the steppe and mud and sea, humming a tune as it moves the grass, sucks the mud dry and joins with the pull of the tide, the even, ever-advancing, never-changing wash of the surf. Crash upon crash, reshaping the world in tiny, swirling increment. The irregular push of blood through his limbs as his heart strains to normalize, to bring him back from the quivering certainty of an abyss. This is what he sees. The streaks of clouds above, white on gray on doom. The wall of wood, upright rotting totems from this distance reduced to the sticks a child might have pressed into the soft earth. The smooth expanse of a ground shaped by the wash of 1,000 waves landing, flowing, then pulling back to the source. The disruption of that smoothness of the damaged patterns that surround him, the line of slop and stumble that stretches behind, the splatter of ejecta all around, the layer of mud that has encased him, saturated him with its wetness, and crusted him at the edges. The mottled black of the figure that drags at him, a creature that's been feathered and then tarred. Her black wings are clipped, and she strains, stumbles, carrying him back to her nest. This is what he knows. He has survived a thing. At least most of him has, but the trial does not seem to be ended. The dead have whispered to him, a father and a friend. They have scoffed at him in his assumption that he came prepared to greet them. His daughter was there when it mattered most. She was the one that showed the strength. Now he will trust her, follow her direction as she leads them home. Later, he will recall being lifted, half standing, half shoved, up and over the familiar curve of a gunnel, the kiss of canvas and aluminum against his face, the purr of an outboard engine, the hint of civilization, the water taking on that depth, its smell only complete when it is surrounded on all sides. Rolling to his back to watch the current of the sky above, a match for the waves that skim beneath, glancing up and seeing her standing there covered in mire, one hand on the wheel, the other pressed against the tow bar, her eyes half closed against the wind. The mud cracked open at her mouth, the sculptor's cast fallen away to reveal the marble smile beneath. That is when he knew. Come what may, his daughter would be.
I'm so sorry. This is totally captivating, but we are at time.
That was it.
Okay. All right. I'm just making sure. All right. No, my bad. It's on me. Derek, that was awesome. Wow. Really? Oh my God. The intensity, this powerful scenery, these relationships, and we're kind of getting just a snapshot of the intensity of the trauma, of the kind of life and death realities, of so many different layers of things here. And you're introducing us to this environment, that I am very unfamiliar with. And it's kind of very fitting that it was a very snowy day. I'm like feeling that icy water, and just incredibly powerful and vivid.
No kidding. I mean, and I tell you, listening to these sections, which were great. It was a great combination of sections that you picked to read, right? Because we get the daughter's point of view, which is very sort of grounded in the cell phone and all this stuff.
Oh, that was too good. That was too funny. That was perfect.
Then we get this near drowning scene, and I was finding it hard to breathe.
And this very traumatic, very cold father figure situation, stress.
Right.
Trauma.
And then we get into this more fantastic area and everything. So you get a great overview of how this book works.
So cool, Derek. Well,
we're going to talk more about all that stuff later.
in the Q&A. Everybody save up your questions for Derek. And Derek, make sure, later on today, you check out all of the comments and all of the love. And Lindsay Vernon said out here, Derek, these sections are so moving. I can't wait to read the hard copy. Well done. We feel the same.
Yes.
All right. So Derek, and from Karen Osborne, woohoo, fabulous.
Thanks.
So we will see you in the Q&A. Derek, thank you so much for an awesome reading.
Thank you.
Oh my God, what a start to the evening, Chris.
I know. It's just so,
Oh.
so
Well, and
busy.
I love our feature readings because we can really get into these pieces, these books, these manuscripts, these stories, these books. But then you just never want anybody to stop. You're
You can luxuriate.
That's right, Chris. That's right.
All right, let's bring up Rebecca.
Well,
and-
we're going to luxuriate some more with our
Wait,
second
wait.
guest of the evening, Rebecca Dimyan.
There she is.
Well,
Got
my
her
God.
hat on. She got her hat on because it's so cold up here in Alaska.
Rebecca, how are you doing this evening?
I'm hanging in there. Sorry, I apologize for my voice. It's a little crazy this morning. I'm getting over the flu.
Oh, well, everybody, you gotta cheer extra, send her healing vibes so that she gets through her reading feeling good and enjoying the Q&A as well. Rebecca, we are so excited to have you here this evening. Chris, would you do the honors of sharing Rebecca's bio with us?
Of course, and an honor it is. Rebecca Dimyan is an award-winning writer, editor, and teacher. Her work has been published in national and international publications, including Vox, the Connecticut Post, Yahoo Health, 34th Parallel, Glassworks Magazine, The Mighty, and many others. She has taught college writing at several universities in Connecticut for nearly a decade. Her memoir, Chronic, will be published by our friends at Woodhall Press in summer of 2023. That'll be here before we know it, though it doesn't feel like it today. And that book delves into her experience with chronic illness and alternative medicine. Her debut novel, in the meantime, Waiting for Beirut. Boy, I'm having trouble. Is forthcoming. It's imminent. From Running Wild Press, and was a finalist, of course, for the 2021 Fairfield Book Prize. That's the last
so much
time.
awesome stuff happening for you, Rebecca.
That's right. That's amazing. It's 2 books. It's like ba-boom, ba-bang.
I spent 11 years working on the first one, and then it's funny that they're both happening at the same time.
That's wild. That's amazing, Rebecca. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Take it away.
And Derek, your reading was amazing. It was just absolutely riveting. I'm going to follow that up with an excerpt from my memoir on women's health. So slightly different. We're changing the tone of the evening a little bit. So I'm going to read a couple of sections from my memoir, Chronic, which is coming out in June, and it is available for pre-order. I'm just gonna dive right in. Again, I apologize if my voice gets a little shaky. Okay, so I'm going to start off with. I'm going to begin with the author's note. The beginning of the book, I think it kind of gives a little overview of what you can expect from this memoir. Okay. Let me begin with a confession. I never wanted to write this book. This memoir is a collection of secrets I never planned to share, the advice I never felt qualified to give, and the hope I never expected to find. In it, I explore emotions and events and very intimate details of my life that are excruciating, and I was initially uncomfortable with these stories appearing in print. However, as I began writing short pieces about my chronic illness and the practices I found helpful in managing it, many women reached out to me. They shared their stories and experiences and frustrations and feelings of utter helplessness, all emotions I had also endured. Some asked for guidance. Others simply thanked me for letting them know that they aren't alone. These messages, these women, are the reason I wrote this book. But what makes me qualified to share my experience? My pain has improved drastically since turning to alternative treatments. Does that mean I am still chronically ill? Can I share my story as if I'm an expert in pain if I don't feel this way on a daily basis anymore? The answer, I believe, is yes. I still have bad pain days sometimes. There's no definitive cure for endometriosis. However, I believe there's a better way to manage it than what Western medicine suggests. Eastern medicine has given me my life back. I do not claim to be any kind of medical professional. I am simply a woman, a writer, a teacher, a daughter, a mother, and an endo warrior. And this is my story. Pain is trauma. Being vulnerable in memoir is terrifying. Will you think less of me when I disclose my first experience of pelvic pain? Will that change your opinion of me and therefore your willingness to hear my story and consider my advice? We spend so much time now attacking each other, not listening to those with differing views, opinions, and experiences. Will you dislike me or judge me because I made mistakes along the way? Because I follow a non traditional path? Am I too different, too imperfect, too cured, not cured enough? One could argue that we've come a long way from diagnoses of hysteria and prescriptions of confinement in asylums for treatment of women in pain, but have we really? While we may not lock women up for experiencing chronic illness anymore, in 2022, her pain is often dismissed or normalized, oftentimes by medical professionals. 1 in 10 women suffer from endometriosis. That's approximately 176 million women worldwide. On average, it takes a woman 5 to 7 years to get a diagnosis. This seemingly infinite cycle of diagnosis and misdiagnosis is like a broken carousel you can't get off. Most women will undergo surgery multiple times, with some ultimately removing organs altogether. Endo is regarded as the most aggressive and painful disease a woman can experience outside of cancer. This chronic illness causes tissue similar to the tissue that lines the uterus to grow on other organs, such as the ovaries, fallopian tubes, and pelvis. In some cases, the abnormal tissue can also grow on other organs like the bowel, kidneys, and even lungs. Endometriosis can cause pain, inflammation, irregular periods, and sometimes infertility. While a shocking number of women have endometriosis, it is an incredibly lonely, isolating illness. It is only recently that social media trends such as hashtag 1 in 10 have emerged and commercials on TV advertising new drugs and promoting awareness can be found. And although I've always preferred to remain private about my suffering, either physical or mental, I have found it therapeutic to write about my experience with endo. The very act of writing about my pain has helped me process it, come to terms with it, and eventually accept it as a part of me. And sharing my story has helped me feel less alone. Cases of endometriosis are as different as the women who suffer from it. There are many complications of the illness ranging from degrees and types of pain to depression and loss of quality of life. One thing we all have in common is that we suffer from a disease without a proven cure. I believe that since each case is different, so too is each effective treatment and path to healing. It is my hope that in sharing my experience with endometriosis and holistic medicine, that people will find helpful solutions and take comfort in knowing that someone else understands what it feels like to suffer from a chronic disease. And perhaps this book will set some on a curative path, or at least let it be something solid to push either for or against. So that is the author's note in the beginning, just to kind of give a little overview. I am going to read another section now from a chapter on food and body image. So let me skip ahead here. All right. Okay, here we go. We live in a world where girls are taught from a young age to hate our bodies. The introduction of social media into adolescent lives has only made this self-loathing more profound. As a teacher, I've read so many papers over the course of the last few years about young women and their various eating disorders, issues which have only been amplified by Instagram and TikTok and the multifarious media images of beautiful women. I grieve for these young women and men who find themselves overwhelmed with the desire to emulate these edited and filtered and unrealistic bodies. And I am grateful. Grateful that as a young, self conscious teenager with my own set of unhealthy eating habits and terrible body image, there was no social media to reinforce these ideals and to lead me down a darker path than the one that already beckoned. My relationship with food has always been complex. Growing up, I could eat anything I wanted without fear of gaining weight. And I was raised in a household that valued hearty meals followed by my mother's homemade desserts. I was raised on breaded pork chops, creamy chicken dishes, and apple turnovers with vanilla ice cream. These were the days before farm to table dishes, quinoa, and organic produce. I'm pretty sure kale hadn't even been invented yet. After school snacks were bags of potato chips, Oreos, freshly baked chocolate chip cookies, bowls of sugary cereal. This was the 90s, and people weren't talking about GMOs or asking questions about ingredients. I'm pretty sure grocery shopping parents didn't even notice there were labels on products. Throw it in the cart, kid, and let's get out of here. But when I turned 15, puberty had finished molding soft, womanly curves, and the voracious appetite and extra calories essential to the sculpting process were no longer necessary. In a relatively short period of time, I went from wearing a size 0 to a 6. The pale, flat sheet of my belly began to ripple with new layers of skin that billowed over the top of my pants. I obsessed about my weight. I pushed myself to work out, running on a treadmill for as long as I could without cramping, a few stretches and some weightlifting to no results. I had difficulty motivating myself to exercise. I despised it. I was a high school girl whose social activities revolved around Starbucks hangouts, late night ice cream runs, and drinking beer or whatever cheap liquor we could get our hands on. The number on the scale was steadily rising. But I was a teenager who wore insecurity and self loathing like a new jacket. I zipped it up and tried to ignore the thick white body underneath. Every pound I gained, every drink I imbibed, every cup of chocolate chip, cookie, dough, ice cream I swallowed with nausea and disgust. And then one day I tried a new strategy for weight loss. If I couldn't lose weight through exercise, I would focus on diet. I began restricting and purging. My days belonged to the foods I did and did not eat. I did not eat breakfast. I did not eat snacks with lunch. I did eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich every day for 4 years of high school. I did drink one 8-ounce bottle of water during school hours. I did eat a half a box of Oreo cookies. I was often famished when I got home from school by 2:30 in the afternoon and would subsequently binge on some kind of sugary or salty snack. I'd eat as much as I could until I felt sick. And then, with the calories sitting in my belly like live grenades, I jammed my finger down my throat in the hope of setting them off. However, I could never make myself throw up. With the cold of the bathroom tile pressing into my knees, head bowed over the toilet as if in prayer, and pointer fingers scraping the tear shaped uvula at the back of my throat, I would sob. I sobbed at my failure to vomit, my failure to lose weight, my failure to fit into the size 0 blue jeans that would qualify me as pretty. But if I'm being honest, this poor body image did not begin as a teenager. Its insidious roots go back much further. I pulled a memory out of some deep place in the back of my mind as I wrote this book. I'm 4 years old, standing in front of the full length mirror in my bedroom. I am wearing a blue and white leotard with white tights. I study my reflection. I see my profile and think that my body shape is too round. My belly looks like the semicircle I recently learned to identify. I am a half moon, but half moons belong in the sky, not in little girls' bedrooms wearing leotards. I am 4 years old, and I don't like what my little girl body looks like in the mirror. My developing brain conjures the word chubby from somewhere. My vocabulary is limited, but I know this word. It is meant for stuffed animals and babies, but I'm neither one of those things. My belly doesn't lay flat. It's supposed to be flat, I think. This memory makes me nauseous, not least of all because my own daughter is 4, and I can't imagine her thinking that she is anything but perfect when she looks at her body in the mirror. And that is where I am going to. Okay, I don't mean to end on such a just depressing note. I swear the book doesn't actually end on such a depressing tone. That's kind of where I planned on cutting off, and my voice is probably not going to last too much longer.
So powerful. Oh my God. Heartbreak emojis. We're in the chat. Rebecca, that was so captivating, so powerful, so vivid. And I got a little tear in my eye. I don't know if y'all can see, but I mean, so palpable. I mean, I really, really relate to these body image issues. And, I mean, especially millennial women growing up during the, when Jessica Simpson wore high-waisted pants and a bigger belt, they thought she was a monster. And when you look back at these things, at what people called, overweight, and just the trauma of all of that, and how it just made you feel like nothing. And it is so important that there are people out there telling their stories just like you, and especially you, our wonderful guest, to make people feel less alone, and to make them see kind of just this, where you're focusing on endometriosis here, but it's also this body image and this feeling of shame, like my pain is my fault, this body is ugly and it's my fault, and I don't deserve anything. And just really incredibly powerful stuff. Thank you so much for sharing what you shared tonight, and thank you so much for this very important work. We need so much more of this.
Thank you so much. That means so much to me. I don't want to start crying because then my makeup's going to get all.
I'm going to cry too. I'm already crying.
Go ahead and cry. It's okay. You can cry here.
Yes, we can cry here. It's just hugs. The hugs are coming through.
Virtual hug.
All right. It's so powerful, so important. And thank you so much for what you shared, and thank you so much for this book. Chris, wasn't it just a really incredibly powerful reading?
Amazing. And the author's note, I mean, it was just so clear and honest, and it makes you want to, I'm assuming that's right in the front of the book, and it's going to make people say, okay, it's it. I'm on to chapter
in the cart. I need this in my life.
I need this book right now more than ever. So
we really do. We really do. And it's so crazy. I feel like there's just been this realization in these last few years. I've gone through plenty of my own moments. This is a very important book, and we do need it right now. Thank you so much, Rebecca. We are going to get into our Q&A a little bit early. And Rebecca, you just tell us how your voice is doing. We're not going to push you. We're not going to push you tonight. Okay. Well, and you also have some really incredible comments in the chat, that you'll have to take a look at later. Just going to put one up here from Karen Osborne, such an important subject and book. Thank you. And from Mom, such a necessary book, Rebecca. Hope many women are helped by sharing your experience. I'm sure that they will. Just really, really awesome. Anyways, diving in to our Q&A time, let's welcome back our first guest of the evening, Derek Ivan Webster. Hey, Derek.
Great reading, Rebecca. Thank you.
Thank you.
Totally. One more round of applause for Derek Ivan Webster and Rebecca Dimyan. Wow. We're going so deep tonight, y'all. We were like in that icy water in Alaska, right? And then we're delving into like this incredibly, these painful experiences by women of all ages, especially focusing in on millennial women. I so feel this. It just, what incredible pictures of life we have here, and these experiences of pain and trauma that form us. Really incredible work, both of you. Thank you so much. Let's kick it off with our famous first question, Chris. Oh, I'm always pointing in the wrong direction in here.
I know. Which way? Okay. All right. Well, we'll start with Derek, of course, since he went first. And the question is a simple one, which is not to say that it's easy, but how has writing and being a writer changed your life?
It's a big question.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's been so many different eras that I probably have thought and defined what it means to be a writer or what is writing has probably evolved over the years. But I think probably if I looked at it in totality, I think writing has confirmed that I'm not crazy. I think,
We love that. Yes.
you know, like I think most creatives like spend a lot of time in their head and clouds and dreams and trying to figure out what those things are and if they're really there and if they are what we're supposed to do with them. And writing has a way of harnessing that. And for me, and I think other artists probably use other things, but for me, I'm not so scared anymore that I'm going to go crazy one of these days. Yeah, I'll just write about it. So
And
yeah,
isn't it such an incredible thing, when you have that faith to say, okay, I'm going to put these, what I'm imagining, this story, this idea, this memory, onto the page, and I'm having the faith to share that, and then people are like, no, you're not crazy. I get that, and this is fascinating. This is interesting. Go for it. That is like one of the most validating experiences, and not only is it telling you like you're not crazy and this is an awesome work, but like then that work lives its life out there and helps other people know that they're not alone, that they're not crazy,
Yeah.
and that they are interested in this experience and they're connected to it. That's a very powerful thing. That'll change your life for sure.
for sure.
Or you realize that everyone's crazy. And that's
Yeah.
how you find out.
Writers.
Yeah,
That's it. There you go. See?
there we
Case
go.
in
There
point.
we go. Example number one over here. Just as crazy on me. Rebecca, passing that question over to you.
I mean, that was such a great response. I mean, I love that.
I need the glasses too.
I wish I had some glass. I need some glasses.
I know. Pass them over to you.
No, I mean, I feel like writing is connection. I mean, it's helped me, with whether I'm writing nonfiction or fiction, just the response from people, whether I'm sharing it in like a writer's group, or if it's a published work, the when people reach out, I mentioned at some point in my book in Chronic, a lot of the reason I wrote this book was because so many women read a column that I wrote about my experiences, and they reached out and they asked questions, and we had these dialogues that were just so important. And I felt like I needed to, to turn it into a book for that reason. But I've stayed in touch with a lot of these women. I've become friends with them, and just in general, I feel like writing brings people together. It doesn't matter what we're writing about. I mean, all of these feelings, all of these events, experiences that we have, like they're different for each person, but there's a lot of overlap in the emotions that we're experiencing. And it's, I mean, I think writers tend to be like, we tend to write in by ourselves, but I think that there's value in sharing our work with each other, and
Always.
and yeah, and I'm not just talking about an audience. I mean, just with each other in general. And it's, yeah, so I would say writing is connection for me.
That is really, really awesome. We believe in that. That'll change your life. Just sharing when you have that faith to share, like I was just saying, like that's a very, very scary thing, but you realize so fast how that connects you to so many people, and you have that community, and that's one of encouragement, of feedback, and just kind of affirmation, like this is a worthy pursuit, and keep going for it. That's an amazing thing to find in life.
For sure.
Incredible. Thank you both so much.
Yeah.
So we've kicked it off with our famous first question. Get your questions in the chat, audience. We see you out there. Oh, I see one has come in.
It just popped up. That was perfect timing.
That was perfect timing, Mary Catherine. Rock on. All right, let's get that in there, Chris.
Yep.
All right.
This is for Derek. But your novel preface about Raven causes me to wonder how encounters with Raven, either encounters with the myths or perhaps personal encounters, have influenced you and your writing?
Oh, what a great question, Mary Kath.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, that's actually a really kind of a sharp question just in terms of the. I mentioned that prologue's there, and also, you know, it rolls into a sense of something more beneath the surface of the story. It feels like it's a very human, very realistic story, and then there's this other stuff that happens that bubbles up from the surface or from beneath the surface. The Raven's there for a few different reasons, and I'm glad you asked about the Raven specifically, because I was drawn to this story. I mentioned just the Alaskan folk tales and the legends, and Raven is such a big part of Native American culture, Native Alaskan culture. Um, and so that drew me in one way, and then another, I mentioned there's sort of like borrowed mythologies, and so the family that is coming up here and engaging in this culture is a family who their roots are from, you know, Irish American, and so they're bringing their own mythologies and family lore and those sorts of things. And so
Right.
what's interesting, there's almost a conversation in the story between the concept of like what the raven is in the native culture and what the crow or raven was with the you know the triple goddess of war, like within the Irish mythology as
Cool.
well. And so those kinds of points, you know, I love that you picked that out, because that's a lot of what was intended was to throughout the story is this constant sense of how things in different faces and different forms can be saying something similar but translated, and maybe it's the same voice saying similar themes in different ways. So even on the third level of the story, there's a biblical tradition, a spiritual tradition beneath the lives of the characters. And so the raven in biblical tradition, right, with Noah and the raven, and that never comes back, and feeding, Elijah in the desert, or Elijah in the desert. There's that richness that I hope eventually made its way into the page, but it was certainly there
So
in my
cool.
formative kind of, that developmental process of trying to find the lines I wanted to trace in the story.
That's awesome. What a fantastic question, and just what a wonderful metaphor and device and connection to all of this myth that's coming into, the story that you're telling. Really, really neat, Derek. We love that. We love that richness. That is so great. To put a question to Rebecca, um, in this memoir, how did you decide to structure it? Is this piece about the younger self at the very beginning? Does it come later? And how did you decide to structure the way it unravels for us?
It's a great question. So yes, I kind of the first chapter of the book talks about all the different ways that it could begin, and I kind of look back at like the
Mm.
4 different beginnings, and I do end up going back. I kind of end up starting it at 13, like with, when you first start becoming a woman and you get your first period and all that. And I kind of start there, but like I look at all the different ways that you could start it, and then I sort of structure it like that. And I
Cool.
look back, and when pain first took place, when I was 22. And so the story, and kind of the first part of the book is more like this personal narrative, like from like 13 up through like my late 20s, early 30s. And then like the second part of the book is more kind of like a medical journal, like it blends research and like different like
Awesome.
natural therapies and different things that I've found helpful. So it was kind of a weird thing to figure out how to structure, and the format did change, like
Neat.
as I was writing it and as I got feedback from different people, from editors, and yeah, so it was kind of interesting how it came together. But yes,
That is so, so, so cool, Rebecca. And I'm just so just struck by how, you are part of these voices that are making a louder sound right now, about endometriosis, about women's pain, about women not being diagnosed soon enough, not being heard, not being paid attention to, unfortunately, in different medical situations. And this is such an important work. And I feel like, that sort of mix of memoir and, like you said, like this like medical journal, like this is how it happened. And these are these different treatments that I discovered. It's so powerful and so important. And I'm really fascinated to know about, like, maybe just a quick follow-up question before I have a question for both of you, as I'm so sorry. What is one of the remedies that was kind of a discovery that has helped with your pain, if you don't mind sharing something that you wrote about in the
Yeah,
book?
sure. So I would say the biggest things have actually been I take a couple of herbal supplements. And again, I feel like it's different for every woman. I think you have to kind of find like what will work best for you. But I take a couple of herbal supplements, and I drink a lot of herbal teas. I do think that tea has really helped, as well as some essential oils. Like there's a couple things I talk about in the book, like a castor oil pack where you can take castor oil and you kind of like you make you put it on like a paper towel and you take a heating pad and you do this whole thing. It's
Yeah,
like it's very like homeopathic and like probably like what our great grandmothers did for like
they knew what they were doing.
yeah. I mean, and it
Right.
really is helpful. It's more effective, I think, sometimes than like, or it has, in my experience, been more effective than like Tylenol or Aleve or any of that. Um,
Yes.
but and acupuncture was a practice I found really helpful too.
Awesome.
Sorry,
Thank
that
you
was like
so
way
much,
more than just one
Rebecca.
day. Sorry.
No, it's really, really great to get to hear that, and that's kind of, just some little tidbits of what we can kind of read more about, like in the context of, of your story, and those testimonials are really important to hear. And speaking of lived experiences captured in writing, so Derek, you lived this very scary fishing in Alaska life. And
I
I mean,
definitely got around.
I'm like, it's like the deadliest catch for me. Like everything I'm imagining, I'm hearing what you're saying, but I'm also like, I'm that scared at the same time. But I know that is like totally different from, salmon, crabs. It's not the same thing. But but I would love to hear about how, okay, you went from this fishing life to this writing life all the way over here in the Northeast United
Yeah.
States. And what were the aspects that you wanted to what were some of these aspects of your lived experience that you really wanted to capture in the book that were
Yeah.
really powerful to you?
No, that's interesting. It's the writing has always been there, but it's almost like it needed to get plugged in
Mm,
to the world that I was living. I actually spent a decent amount of time just on the side. Writing's always been sort of the side job, right?
yeah, but
Um, and but writing a lot of sci-fi and genre fiction and those sorts of things, um, and it was just in some and I love that still. I still
yeah.
imbibe of that and think well of that. But for me, it might have been in my own writing. There was versions of escapism to it. There was a version of
Mm.
projection into other worlds, and you have control over those, and you can make
Uh-huh.
a metaphor, right? Like you can build it as you need, construct it as you need. And actually the Fairfield MFA program with amazing mentors like Karen Osborne and Eugenia Kim were integral in the process of helping me to recognize that well, one, people say write what you know, which is a thing, right?
Yep,
And I'd been like
yep.
running
For
away from that
sure.
for a long time, right? I was trying to write everything that I didn't know, which maybe even was a little bit of sometimes we writers can escape into the research and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So to convince myself or to be convinced by wiser writers than myself that actually like there was real story there and power there,
Yeah.
and sometimes the things we live on a daily basis, like we don't notice how unique and interesting they are until enough people say that's pretty unique and interesting.
Yes.
So,
So true.
as I was convinced of that, like my thesis and my project sort of bent in the direction of actually let's go deeper with this and let's explore what kind of a world. And then I mean, again, both with fantastic mentorships, writers helping me to figure out
Right.
where do you draw that line, because I between nonfiction and fiction, I certainly went very heavy on the fiction side, but the world was, I hope, was a authentic, loving, not a recreation, but
Yeah.
and infusion of enough of my memory and thought and
Well, I
questions.
can tell you, I've read a significant portion of this book, and I feel like I could maybe go out and do some salmon fishing after reading, because
Oh my God, Chris Belding is gonna get out there.
I'm not going to do it, but
Alaska.
no, I mean it feels so real. Like I mean, you get, every detail of this is woven in there nice, because I mean, you have characters you care about, right? I mean, that's the main thing,
That's
and the
right.
situations were then blended into that with all this stuff about salmon fishing. It's so interesting, and so, I mean, you could tell me right now that you made all that stuff up, but I wouldn't. I believed
You'd
it.
be like, no, I know about
I
this now.
totally believed it, and I'm sure none of that's made up. But I wonder, did you ever think of, having had that experience for all that time? Did you ever consider doing a nonfiction, even any, an article, or never mind a
Yeah.
memoir? But was that ever on your radar, or was it just like novel? It's got to be a novel.
I think I skipped that step. I don't,
Yeah.
like I'm sure
No, that's not
should
a
have
skip.
existed and might exist somewhere down the road. But I was far more interested in looking at the roots and the anchors beneath the surface, and seeing what would happen if I put the projections of some
Yeah.
constructed characters in the midst of that world.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of what if in the characters, right? Like they're all amalgams. Like we as
that's
writers, I
right.
think we borrow so many different, pieces to patch together into an
Oh,
amalgam.
sure.
But there are characters, that are sort of more me than others, and there are questions of like, well, what if this had happened? What if this decision had been made?
Right.
And for me, that there was a lot of. I mentioned that I wrote this book as I was retiring after 37 years of fishing. Right? I saw it coming. Right, I started writing this at the beginning of the program,
Right.
and I knew it was this book was a lot of me coming to terms with that, wrestling with that, figuring out what that meant, resolving any of the, tying off what lines could be tied off. And
Yeah.
so in that sense, it had to be fiction. Like it wasn't going to be
Yes.
me writing my last
Yes.
chapter. It was going to be me exploring, what do I really think about this world from the top looking down.
Wow. I feel like, we're always noticing these like fascinating similarities between our, feature guests of the evening. And I feel like the works that both of you shared with us are kind of like the culmination of just so many years of toil, and whether it's fiction or memoir, right? That's kind of encapsulated inside of that it uh, crystallizes it, that it celebrates it, that it expresses that. I think that's really, really incredible, and that's so cool to hear, Derek. And it's interesting to hear you say that you've had such an interest in writing sci-fi, because I feel like for a little old me coming from suburbia in the Northeast, that this is quite an extreme environment that like lends itself to kind of a fantastical sort of sci-fi, almost like a sci-fi moment, or a thriller-esque vibe at these different times, especially as we're kind of delving into these metaphors, or seeing that sort of traumatic near drowning experience, this sort of extreme of existence, that you might see in sci-fi, maybe in outer space or something, but we're seeing it here on planet Earth in a very extreme, environment and moment.
The landscapes are, it's like another planet.
Yes, yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, very, very cool. Well, so Derek was just sharing about, he touched on his MFA experience, and Rebecca, I would just love to hear about what you went into the MFA focusing on, what you focused on there, and kind of how that has brought you through to the present moment with these works. If you kind of follow that thread.
Yeah, I think so.
A very long thread, I know. a lot happened.
No, I mean the MFA program was one of the best experiences of my life. I got so much out of it. And it's funny, I went in expecting to only focus on fiction. I actually do not enjoy writing nonfiction. And it seems to be more, I tend to write more nonfiction than fiction, which is really funny.
Wow.
I try to stay away from it, but it just keeps pulling me back. I don't know.
He's dragging me back there.
Drag me back. I don't know. But yeah, so I mean, my thesis was the novel that's coming out. But I feel like I had such wonderful experiences with my mentors, with all of the teachers, and also the other students. Like everyone in the program was just, it's just such a supportive, like wonderful place to, you know, really hone your craft. And I feel
Totally.
like the skills, the tools that I got from this program have helped me in fiction and nonfiction, and they're completely invaluable. And I will always have so much gratitude for the Fairfield MFA program. I can't say enough. I actually have a couple of students this semester who are interested in MFA programs, and I'm like, I'm trying to, you know, not push them to Fairfield. I'm like,
This,
gotta check it out, guys.
this is the
Tell
best
ya.
one.
This is the best one. This is where you want to go. I'm not biased or anything, but I'm telling you, this is the one.
I love that, Rebecca. That is so great. And we really, you know, we really feel the same way about the program. Just the most incredible community of people, amazing, you know, teachers and mentors, and just such, just the support and encouragement of that community. And that's the same vibe that Chris and I are trying to keep alive in the stream. And
Well, for sure, Chris and Katie, you guys do a lot in terms of that support. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. Thank you both.
You're welcome. But speaking of great mentors and from the Fairfield program, we have our friend Karen Osborne here asking Derek, often a novel teaches you something. Did writing your novel teach you something about father-daughter relationships or being human?
Oh, what a fabulous question.
A little bit of both for sure. I like that question. You know, if you look into the abyss looks back at you. Right? It's a little bit of that.
I love it.
Yes, I think so, and I think so. This my project started out actually many years ago. It started out. It was just going to be a sci-fi allegory, where I mean I was in love with the concept, the poetic concept, the life cycle of the salmon.
Yeah.
If you read the book, you'll get that more, or just
I'm
look
getting
at
it already.
right? But like, you know, it's this epic journey. Everyone's seen it on the documentaries and that sort of thing. These fish, they go thousands of miles. You know, we don't even know how far they go because we can't track them that way. And then finally they make it back after 5,000 miles, you know, unseen, and they make it back to the exact waters that they started, and they skipped over hundreds of thousands of streams along the way, and it's for just that smell, that perfection of that source where they came from, and then they die. Right, like it's all of it, like the press, the I mean, there's something so existential in that question of like,
Totally.
it means so much, it means everything to recreate, to reproduce, and then they actually do, as they commit to it, the fresh water, it poisons their body, and it's not like a nice death. It's a really ragged, nasty, horrible death. They're like zombies that are just like, you know,
Yes.
And so that is just a beautiful, troubling, interesting metaphor.
I love that.
And so I was going to write this book that was going to be this sci-fi construct of like, okay, but what if we saw it and, you know, it's actually people, but we only realize later that it's actually the cycle of the salmon that we're looking at, you know, something like that. Which is a short story, but not a novel, by the way. But in the course of the project, it became very human, and it became not a deconstruction, but a construction of what is humanity in the midst of that question. And so that's when it became a real book, I hope, like when it wasn't about like extending a metaphor to be cute about it, or not cute, but like as a device. It became, how can I look at what it is to be a father, what it is to be a daughter, what it is to commit everything to something at all cost, and then how much, you know, are you willing to pay in that price, and is it worth it? And you know, generational and those sorts of things. There's his father, there's him, and there's his daughter, an extension of this sense of the cycles that are endless in nature, but we look at them like as up and down, like one cycle at a time. So yes, I learned a lot. Now, did I, what final resolve? I think it brought up more questions for me than anything else. But I would say
Wow.
that I also started this out to be I mentioned the conversation between Alaskan folklore and mythology, and then you had Celtic, Irish, influences coming to the other side. But one thing that I don't know if it surprised me or if it snuck its way in. I mentioned a biblical tradition made its way in, so the raven of Noah and Elijah showed an appearance, and I think that happened because as I got more existential in the question, I got more spiritual in the answers.
So cool.
And so, yeah, so if I get no answers really, but the questions certainly became higher level questions, I think, and for
Yeah.
me, more resonant questions that hopefully once the book is put down, it has people thinking about those things on I hope,
Yes.
a deeper plane.
I love that. Just kind of getting into like this deeper and deeper, you know, water in terms of this metaphor and humanity and existence and what we think about that. I love that. That is so cool. People can really just like dwell not only in the story but these these different sort of ideas and questions and metaphors that you're bringing up. That's awesome, Derek. um to shoot a quick question over to Rebecca before our famous last question. Rebecca, I'm so curious. You have years, like a lifetime of lived experience with this pain, with endometriosis, and that process of finding what is really going to treat this pain, and how to overcome that, and also kind of face these different stigmas as a woman. But in the process of writing this book, did you kind of come across anything that you didn't expect, or something new that you discovered that was beneficial to you in the process of writing it?
That's a really great question. Actually, yes. So in some of the conversations that I had in some of my research, just different therapies that I hadn't heard of before. What's the oh my gosh, I'm playing. Sorry, my brain is so foggy from
Oh no, don't worry,
the ice therapy. What is it called? Cryotherapy. Yeah, cryotherapy,
Like
right?
the cold.
Yeah, cold. Yeah, cryotherapy. That one was like
It's something like that. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
so I came across someone who actually had used that therapy to treat her endo pain, and she had like tremendous results from that, and that was like so interesting to me. But it was really interesting. So a lot of my research too, I belong to several like groups on various social media platforms, and to hear different women's experiences. Also, a lot of interesting changes happened from COVID that
Right.
impacted endometriosis pain, and
Yeah.
that to me was like really. So I experienced some shifts from I had COVID twice,
No!
so like all of it, like it did impact my period. It impacted my experience with endo, and to learn that a lot of other women also had similar experiences or some interesting changes was very interesting to me. So I kind of ended up doing some more research into that. I found some studies that are starting to be done on that, like how COVID and the vaccine kind of impact that, which is just really interesting.
Very important that your writing is also getting that word out, and like standing as a voice, like this is happening.
Yeah.
Very important. And I'm so sorry to another quick question your way. I know, but it's kind of a big question, but quick, because we have to get to our last question. But Chris and I love to ask multi-genre people, how does this feel? Because you the Waiting for Beirut is fiction, right? And you said I don't really want to write nonfiction, but I find myself writing nonfiction. How do you feel about that switch? Did it feel very natural in a way, even though you're like, no, I don't want to be doing this, but I am doing it and I need to do it?
Yeah. I mean, it does feel so. Even my fiction, so it's historical fiction, but it is based on family history.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
even
yeah. That's right.
so there is an element of like nonfiction to it. I mean, I fictionalize my family's stories.
Right.
But yeah, so I'm just drawn to it just feels natural for me to write, I guess, about yeah, I'm just drawn to it. And it does feel natural, even though I resist it sometimes.
There's a very big thread in there, right? Because, like, as you said, it's fiction, but it's yeah. I mean, but it's I mean, I can't say anything because I am strictly only poetry, but
So
I but
far.
I want to say I'm making an observation here based on many streams and many fiction writer friends that drawing heavily, like as Derek was saying, from what you know and from your life, maybe there's not such there is a world of difference between fiction and nonfiction, but there's a lovely little thread there that maybe is not so difficult to sort of traverse between the two when you kind of have that sort of motivation that you do with these certain topics, Rebecca. So I'm
What is real? What is
what
true?
yeah. At the end of the day, yeah.
It's
Just
like an
thinking
umbilical
somebody.
cord. It's like an
Sorry,
umbilical
I'm just thinking somebody tuning in right now and seeing Katie over here, which is
What is
like,
happening in here?
right, go ahead,
There's the glasses.
Yep.
Derek. What were you saying?
Oh, just it feels like an umbilical cord. Like it's another organic being that's different than,
Yes.
but it's tied in a lot of the
Connected.
nutrients and a lot of the materials. The bloodline is like coming from the mother, from the source, and
That's
it can be
good,
fiction in that
Derek.
way. And looking at it that way helped me a lot, like to tether, to feel like, well, I'm answerable to the fact that I have the DNA of the source in this. I'm allowed to do a lot of different things, and it can be its own creature, it can be its own life, and it should flourish in those ways. But like you're also like you have to be respectful of the source in that sense.
Derek, that was like the most beautiful
Yeah.
metaphor that I feel like just formed right now and was shared with us. And I have a few people that I like quote frequently from like live stream quotes. I feel like I'm gonna be coming back to that one quite a bit, Derek. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so true. I'm saying it's so true as a mono genre person, but
So far.
yes, Chris, Chris says it's okay for me to say that. I think that really really resonates.
We all have permission. We're allowed to do that.
Thank you. Yes.
I feel a memoir percolating over there.
Christopher.
Maybe it's in poetry. I mean, there are these poetry.
A memoir in verse. Oh my gosh, Chris.
I don't know. I just think it could happen.
Well,
But anyway,
I do
final
very memoir-like poems sometimes. Well, we'll talk about me some other day. But Chris,
yes.
hit our guests with our famous last question.
All right. We'll go Derek and then Rebecca. So the double question. Well, the first one is a pearl of wisdom for the writers who are tuning in right now. It's something that you've learned along the way that you can help out people with, and a book recommendation.
Okay, 2 barrels.
Yeah.
So, pearl of wisdom. It's a small thing, but I think it's mighty. Tiny increment. I mentioned that my writing. So I had a period when I was freelance, when I had so much time on my hands. I was before I have 4 kids now, so it was before all that. And and it felt like, oh man, I need entire days to try to get anything productive done. And life intervenes in a beautiful, amazing, shackling way. And so, I found, and actually the MFA helped me to sort of pace myself this way and recognize I did it part-time, like I did 1 semester a year, and so that was increments. But then even the practice itself became, I proved to myself I can wake up at 5 in the morning. I can write until about 6:10 when I gotta start helping, get everything together for the day, and before the kids are awake, and maybe just do some reading and some light research stuff at night. And it doesn't sound like a lot, and the old me would have been like, that's just a throwaway. Like, what's that even gonna do?
Oh,
And
No,
the book that I wrote was written in those hours, like those
that's
mornings, waking.
awesome.
And so just to say, if you're out there and you're thinking, I can't do it, I want to, but I can't, and I don't have the situation, it's not the situation you need. It's just the ambition and the willingness to stick to even small incremental advancements with your writing. And if you do it, it
right.
can be done. And I would not have believed that myself. So it's a small thing, but I think it's important.
Yeah. No, that's great. I've found in my own life that, periods in my life where I've had less time, I've written more, because you have those small, then this hour here, and it's so concentrated. It's like a bouillon cube.
Well, that's got so much flavor in it,
Yeah,
it's little, but it's mighty.
jam packed. Whereas, if you have all day, it's like, yeah, I'll get to it.
Yeah.
Or you sit down and you're like, yeah, well, if you hear that ticking, tick, 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 it's like, I'm
Getting right to it.
All right, Derek, a book recommendation for us.
Yeah, Other Barrel. So I read it a while. It's not that recent, actually. I read it as part of the program, but it stuck with me in such a way that I usually recommend it. I just loved Richard Powers' Overstory so much.
Yes.
I loved what he did with mythology, actually, and taking something like the life cycle of the trees, and turning it into almost a fantasy novel, except it's hyper realistic, hyper scientific, beautifully written, beautifully characterized. So, and actually, that was the first of his books that I read, but having read others, he's just an amazing author. But that book really stuck with me.
Yeah, that's
Nice.
great. Good one, Rebecca. Pearl of Wisdom.
Well, first of all, I want to say I agree with both of you. That whole Derek, I just started recently getting up early to do that whole before my daughter wakes up to get that writing in. That like 45 minutes, have a nice hot cup of tea. Everyone's still sleeping, dogs still sleep, kids still sleep. Just get some writing done. And you're right, Chris, what you were saying, when if you don't have a lot of time, you seem to use it better. At least I found that. I actually wrote Chronic during the pandemic, when I was working from home. At the time, my daughter was 18 months old, and I had no time, but somehow I used my time so well. And I don't know. But it's funny, you don't have a lot of it, so you just use it really well. But sorry, my voice is starting to fade, but I made it the whole time, almost there. So I would say to never give up if you believe in a writing project. If you're writing a book, or even a short piece of fiction or a poem, always stick with it in the face of rejection. I think that's probably the best thing that I learned. Both of my books were rejected by agents and other places before they found their homes. And I feel like it's important to always believe in yourself and to keep putting yourself out there.
1,000,000%.
And then, so I would say book recommendation. So right now I'm in a book club with my 11-year-old nephew, and we are reading Gordon Corman novels. And so it's a YA recommendation, but on Thanksgiving, he gave me his copy of The Fort, which is Gordon Corman's new book. So I've just started. It's really great. I mean, he has great character development. It's great plot. I mean, it is YA, but it's so great. And
that is so great, Rebecca.
We're having a great time with it. So
that is so much fun. I absolutely love that. Well, everyone, let's give one last round of applause to our incredible guests this evening, Derek Ivan Webster and Rebecca Dimyan. Thank you so much for being our guests this evening, for sharing so much with us, and for sharing such incredible readings. We are so excited for both of you for these works, and for everything that you are also currently working on as well. And we're so honored that you are our last guests of 2022. We also just have this beautiful message in here from from Mom. She says, "Thanks, Katie and Chris, for your devotion to the live stream. Your guests have enriched my life by exposing me to so many new writers whose works I might never have discovered. Thanks also to all the authors who have appeared over the years on the live stream. See you in 2023. Thanks, Mom."
Thanks, Mom. How awesome is that?
That was so lovely. We are so honored. We would not be able to do this incredible stream, have this great time without all of you out there watching and supporting us, and without these incredible writers and friends that we have who have been our amazing guests, just like all of you. And it is an honor also to end the year with US FUMFA friends, our colleagues, and just to kind of feel that, I'm feeling those Enders vibes right now. I'm feeling those little rooms in that retreat center. I'm feeling that.
Oh, yeah.
I need a salad table.
Oh yeah. The salad table.
Oh, the salad table.
Oh yeah, yes. Shout out.
When we started, there was no salad table, and they quickly realized that there's only so many lunches they could serve, and they said, "Let's put out a salad table."
Whoever had that idea, brilliant.
Game changer. Both of you have to hop on to Facebook and YouTube and just see all of the incredible comments, all of the love that you've received. We have such an awesome mix of folks in the crowd from FUMFA, people who've been former guests on here, and just all of your friends and fans who joined us this evening. It's really been incredible. Thank you both so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
All right. And everyone, have a good night. Hopefully see you at Eco Evolution on Friday. And happy holidays and happy New Year.
Happy holidays.
Yay. Good night, everyone.